Welcome back, artists. I'm Wyatt Paints, and today I'm righting a wrong. You see, a little while back, Disney did a no to my boy M.O.D.O.K when they did this. Ugh, gross. At least that's what I thought. Until a few minutes later, they did this. Oh, drink it in. This is gross. This is gross. So, in order to return M.O.D.O.K to the craggle face I remember him, I snuck this one in just for me. No client this time. In this 1/6 scale M.O.D.O.K. As you can guess, it's going to take quite a few steps to bring M.O.D.O.K to life. So, you might want to pause the video here, grab yourself a snack, and get settled in, because it's going to take a minute. But it's going to be worth it, because I'm going to be pulling all the stops out for this one. Also, I get to show off a Christmas gift I got. Thanks. I think it fits with the SpongeBob shirt. I like the vibe. Now, if you're ready, I'm going to head out to my spray booth. Let's get started. To begin, I'll be appreciating all of my parts to give me a good idea where all my highlights will go, starting with uniform gray. This first pass really starts to only give me a rough idea where the larger volumes are. The main benefit to this step is that painting the lighter shades will be easier over a gray than that black primer. And as luck would have it, a large portion of this base is a billowing cloud of smoke, so this pre-highlighting will serve as a base midtone and the highlight, completing this part early in the painting process. Next, Starship Exterior. This step will look very similar to the last, only slightly lighter, and with one other key detail. I'll be trying to maintain a 45-degree angle in relation to the base of the model. This way, natural highlights will begin to form. The important thing to remember here is that you want to feather this on top of the previous color, not smother it. So go slow and let it gradually build up. Last in line for this pre-highlight is Dead White. This is one of the few times you'll see me paint with pure white like this on the channel. I usually avoid it because so few things in nature are this pure white. But clouds are an exception I make along with pre-shading because it'll be covered in future layers. But the white certainly helps the colors pop. The important aspect of this step is the extremely high angle I spray from to maintain lighting consistency. Once this was dry, not only was my pre-shading done, but the smoke was painted. Next, I moved on to paint the jet coming from the chair, using Void Chill Blue and my custom teal. The latter took the lead as I used it to create some interesting contours along the length. I increased the saturation towards the funnel end, as typically, the point of the exhaust would be the brightest. Next, I added in Void Shield to create a subtle highlight that I focused also on the top of the funnel. This helps give the illusion of a bright ignition source somewhere in the plume. Next, I tackled his golden bod and chair. In order to capture all of his gloriousness, I imagine in my head that I'm going to need a quartet of gold mica powders. Using mica powder here gives me more control over the blends and plenty of options when it comes to various surfaces without having to pull out so many paints. First up, Beaver Brown. That's not a joke, that's just what it's called. This was used exclusively on the base of the chair. That way my darkest metallic is towards the bottom, with them getting progressively lighter as your eyes move up the model. Using small tricks like this in your painting can help guide the viewer to where you want them to look. Copper Shine came in to highlight the chair and step in as the shaded area for M.O.D.O.K's armor. For the chair, I wanted to make a center pillar highlight, so I focused it there, and I also caught the top of the arm panels. As luck would turn out, this is also a great shade to base his circlet in. I still had a bit of paint left in my brush, so I went ahead and reinforced the chair highlights. Real Gold came in like an all-star as the midtone for his armor and the highlight for his circlet. After a quick few passes, I added some Queen's Gold into this mix to lay down the peak highlights. Next up is Limb Armor, featuring lavender purple and pearl silver white added in for a highlight. After masking some areas to protect the golds we painted earlier, I laid down a thin smooth coat of purple on his arms and legs. After the base dried, I added some pearl white to create a highlight so that it can create a nice smooth gradient on my purples. Unfortunately, this subtle highlight is best seen in person. As the last step of my spray booth for a while, I used Rust-Oleum metallic finish on the plinth to give me a nearly chrome base to work with. The trick here with this stuff is to shake the heck out of it, then lay down the thinnest coats you can. After 2 or 3 coats, you'll start to get a nice mirror finish. If you rush and put too much, you'll end up with a very patchy finish, so go slow and your patience will be rewarded. Now, before we get to the brushwork, I'd like to take a moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. Each month, your generosity continues to astound. Thank you. If you would like to join this painting pantheon, you will find a link to my Patreon in the description below. Also, it's a good time to remind you, if you like the video, like the video. It really helps. I really appreciate it. All right, I'm done begging for clicks. Let's get back to M.O.D.O.K. Now at my painting table, I mixed up some bad brews and dwarf skin to base coat all of the skin. As per usual with villains, I like to start with a bit of a purple bluish skin tone to give them an eerie bloated skin look. This initial layer was a 50-50 mix, but as I move through the layers, I'll be using less and less of brews until I'm using pure dwarf skin. Here the mix is about 75-25, as I begin to get more deliberate with my paint placement to enhance all of the craggles he has on his face. Now at about 90-10% mix, I reserve this for the most predominant features on his face. His face lights here are what this character uses to emote, as they lack the typical proportions and key signifiers like eyebrows, so it's super important you can read the curl from his brow and the sharpness of his grimace from across the room. I felt the skin could use a little bit more something, so I mixed in dark flesh to add a bit more variance to the skin tone. For me, this just gives the face a little bit more visual interest and keeps it from looking so flat. Focusing in on his eyes, Void Shield served as the base. M.O.D.O.K is one of those characters that doesn't have pupils. It's a design choice that gives a bit of mystique to them, as you're never quite sure who or what they're looking at, or even more unnervingly, that they can see everything. Either way, a good pupilless eye starts with a solid base that leaves a nice dark outline. If he doesn't look like he put on mascara this morning, then you didn't leave a thick enough line, and it's better to fix it now. I followed this up with using Frostbite and White. Mixing these two colors, I made progressive highlights, each time covering a smaller and smaller area in the eye. This creates a buttery smooth transition in the eye and gives it the dimension and depth I'm looking for. And extra, this is a fairly easy technique if you go slow and just stay within the lines. Next, I use Squid Pink to base his gums. I like doing gums before the teeth because it lets me get those little sharp bits between the teeth much easier than if I did this later. Since I'm in the mouth, it only makes sense to go ahead and paint his teeth using an old favorite, skeletal bone. Nothing too fancy here, every tooth got an even application. Now to shade the mouth with Light Tone and Darucci Violet. While each tooth got its typical basic shading, what is new is using the Light Tone shade to do it, when my typical teeth treatment calls for them to be doused in sepia. I also add a bit of Darucci to the Light Tone to shade the gums, and with how well the Light Tone turned out, I think I have a new standard way of dealing with grimy teeth. Moving on, I grabbed Oak Brown. Unlike the Disney M.O.D.O.K, mine will have his classic mop top hair, and this brown is as good as any to start from. With highly detailed and modeled hair like this, once you get a decent layer down, you can easily highlight using dry brushing or edge highlighting, which is exactly how I plan on applying this khaki, as a highlight using a makeup brush. Short controlled strokes across the details gave me simple yet effective highlight. My highlights were looking a bit desaturated, so I turned to a sepia wash to tone everything back to brown without losing my highlights. I also took this time to shade the gold in his circlet. Next, I used that wash to stipple in a shade for all the damage in the suit and in the recesses. This is one of those steps that can get pretty tedious, but it's essential in giving a paint project like this a level up in craftsmanship. It's how you handle details like this that can really wow the viewer. So take the time to add them and trust that someone's going to look close enough and be impressed that you even thought of this detail as well. I picked up this Dwarven gold paint recently, so I figured I might use it now. While I like my metallics so far, adding in a bit of variety to the surfaces and metals on display will only elevate the piece as a whole. So I went around the body and chair looking for odds and ends to pick out and highlight. I like the color so much, I also used it for his knuckle armor. And since I had it out, I might as well use it to pick out a few details on the plinth as well, as I don't personally want to spend hours and hours painting this statue and then put it on a block of chrome that'll be a shiny eyesore. So I picked out some of the details here and there to break up all that silver. Speaking of silver, shining silver was up next to pick out even more details around the chair and armor. Again, using a contrasting color for this helps break up the monotony of the metallics and adds just a ton of visual interest for not a lot of effort. Next, I wanted to paint the fabrics of his chair with violet and toxic boils. Since M.O.D.O.K already has purple in his main colors, it only makes sense for me to continue with them in the fabrics of his chair, starting with a nice opaque layer of violet to give it a great foundation to begin. Mixing in toxic boil, I've created a desaturated highlight to show where M.O.D.O.K has worn down the vibrancy of the upholstery with constant friction. A stiff stippling I feel is the best way to apply this, with a bit of dry brushing to feather out the transitions. I followed this up by switching focus to M.O.D.O.K's little health meter by blacking it out with matte black. While this detail can be painted a few different ways, the first thing that pops in my head is a heart monitor. So I stippled in some Warlord purple into the background of the meter. Nothing too obtrusive, as it is just there as a secondary lighting from the monitor. For the initial line, vermilion will take the pole position. Thankfully, this model has nice sharp details, so following the line like this was pretty easy. Infernal Orange and Cygnus Yellow created the glowing moving point of the meter. In such a tight space, you won't need to worry about fussing over blending because successive edge highlighting layers will blend itself. The important thing is to save that pure yellow for the dot itself. Switching gears to the plinth, I grabbed this steel wash to add detail by recess shading and pin washing. This is where I started to like the look of the plinth and really got a sense of how it was going to come together. Spoiler alert, I think it's going to be dope. To reach that dopeness, it was back to the spray booth with Warlord Purple. This became the first layer of the OSL effect that I'm going to use for his psionic powers manifesting. And since this is a fairly transparent paint, I could just feather it on the hair and tint it to create natural shadows from the source. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't go too far, and so that you can't tell what color is underneath. Next, Punk Rock Pink gets dropped in the brush for the next step. While highlighting magentas or purples, it's very easy to go too far with a pink that just takes over and makes the whole thing look more pink than purple. So if you can find a very intense pink like this, you buy yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Just don't get too comfortable and overpaint here. For the final highlight, I casted Squid Pink. This is one of those pinks I was talking about that can easily shift the hue. So I reserved this just for the highlight peak, and that's it. For the final detail, I was back to the paint desk with Darucci and Squid Pink. Using these two, I shaded and highlighted the small bolt details on the circlet. There was a few moments there where I thought about doing this in gold or another metallic, but in the end, the pink just felt right. And M.O.D.O.K is done. Wow, This came out exactly how I saw it in my head. What do you guys think? Did I capture the classic comic M.O.D.O.K here? Is there anything you would have done differently? Should I try to fit in more comic statues? Be sure to let me know the answers to all of these questions down in the comments. I look forward to seeing what you have to say. I read every single one, and while I'm still able to, I try to answer every one as well. This was a beast of a project that took me way longer than my usual videos. So if you like the format of the video and you want to see these longer ones, be sure to throw that like and let me know. With that, our time has come to an end. So I'll end this as I always do. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.